Hello and welcome to the continuing course on Kabbalah for beginners. We're on lesson 2 of the technical sessions. I'd like to welcome all our students. Please feel free to ask questions, but keep your questions pertinent to the material. We'll be reading tonight from the 4 phases of creation, and you'll find that article in the lesson text links column in the fall 2008 schedule on the courses page. If you haven't already downloaded that or opened it, please do so, because that's what we'll be reading from this evening. And let's start tonight with an intention. The goal of creation is to please the creation. That is, the Creator wants to fill us with the very best. And until a man receives all the very perfect and the very best that has been ordained for him by the Creator, he experiences the lack of everything. And this is the sign that he has not yet reached the goal of creation. This is a quote from Rabash. And now the 4 phases of creation. Let's discuss for a moment the way Kabbalah names light. This will be easier if you will refer to this list in the article. We have 5 phases. Phase 0 is Shorish, named Keter. Phase 1 is Aleph, named Hakma. Phase 2 is Bet, named Bina. Phase 3 is Gimel, named Zir Anpin. Phase 4 is Dalet, named Malkut.
Let's continue. Keep going.
A quick check with an English to Hebrew dictionary will confirm that Aleph, Bet, Gimel, and Dalet are the first 4 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Now it is important to note that the names Keter, Hakma, Bina, Zir Anpin, and Malkut are not names of creatures, but rather names of phases in the process of creation. So when we say Malkut, we are talking about the creature as it is in that stage.
Keep going.
In each phase, there is a different kind of light, at least from our perspective. In reality, there is never anything but one light, and the difference we sense is completely and totally because of our own perception. The root phase, 0, or Shoresh, corresponds to the light called Keter. Phase 1, Hakma, corresponds to a light called Hakma. Phase 2, Bina, corresponds to a light called Hasadim. Phase 3, Zir Anpin, corresponds to a combination of the first 2 lights, both Hakma and Hasadim. Phase 4, Malkut, corresponds to the light of Hakma once again. The Hebrew word for light is Or, O-H-R, Or. Those astute students will see that the correlation between Or Hakma and the Creator giving pleasure, as well as Or Hasadim and the creature rejecting pleasure.
Okay. Welcome again to the Sunday night technical lessons. These are taken from excerpts that were included in Wondrous Wisdom. Actually, they are from Ptihah, which is the science of Kabbalah. It is the introduction to Talmud Eser Sfirot, and a very, very important book for all technical studies. Now, there's no doubt with as many students as we have that there's going to be some questions that do not apply to the work. In truth, most of them, to what we're studying here, most of those questions we won't answer. Why? Because it would be like going into a physics course or a calculus course and asking questions on sociology. Certainly, there are some things that do connect, and if I see questions that do connect, that you had maybe from Tony's lesson that might connect in here, that was on Wednesday night. By the way, that was an incredible lesson. I hope that you got to see it. If you didn't, please do download that and watch it. And by the way, also there's going to be again an additional lesson this coming Wednesday, and you will not want to miss that. Now, and the article that you reviewed in that lesson called "There's None Else Besides Him" is a very, very good lead in to this particular lesson. What we're going to start with, there's always a question right up front, and that is everyone wants to know, where are we in this technical picture? So we're going to start out just a little bit different this time than I normally start the classes. I'm going to take about, hopefully only 3 or 4, maybe 5 minutes and go through very quickly what we're going to be studying in just a general overview here for these 12 weeks. And in that, we will get to our world, okay, in this original idea. And then we're going to come back and we're going to study it in parts, okay? So, originally, we have something called a phase of development, and we're going to call this development of desire. And really, it's a development for two desires, two different desires. One desire is the desire for pleasure. I'll put in a great big P. And the other one is a desire for status. Still a desire for pleasure, but what is the status thing? Actually, it's for the status of the Creator, and you'll see how that fits in. In other words, it's I want to do what the Creator does. I want to kind of be like a child that wants to do what Daddy does, what the person that created me, or what Mommy does. So, in truth, there's this development of this thing called a desire, like a kli, like a cup, like something that holds something. We are on occasion, we're going to go through a few Kabbalistic terms, like one of the first ones that you're going to hear is kli. The word kli. It means vessel, a vessel, like a cup. And obviously it will hold a substance in it. In this particular case, a desire does hold a substance, or it doesn't. If it doesn't, it suffers, and if it does, it feels good. What is the substance that a desire holds? It holds pleasure. Now, there is this entire system of creation that we're going to be studying, which is basically exactly what this course does. It lays out in a technical manner the process of creation, from the very initial thought of creation, which is way up here, through this development of an initial desire. What's it for? A desire to receive pleasure. A desire to be able to receive pleasure. And along with it, it develops a desire for two different kinds of pleasure. We're going to find out that one of those two desires did not come from the Creator. One of them did. And that's important. You'll understand why a little bit later. But anyway, there's this vessel to receive pleasure, and it's going to find out that the only problem with it receiving pleasure is that it senses that there is a giver, and it wants to receive everything, but every time it does, it has nothing to give back, and so it kind of feels like it has some shame involved here. It's always on the receiving end of the deal. Remember that tale that we talked about last week with regard to the giver and the person that's constantly receiving from them all the time? And he says, hey, what can I possibly give you? I love you so much, I'll give you anything that you want. And the guy says, I want to be the giver. I want to do what you do. And he says that I can't give to you. Well, that's kind of the case that we're in, or that this vessel's in. Let's put it that way. So, And here's a question from Brandy. Is Adam and Eve humans, or are they a source of light and energy? See, now this is what I'm talking about. Brandy, listen real quick. We're going to go through. I'm going to kind of show you, get you all the way down to where we normally would go, far, far further than we would normally go, so that you will know how far we have to go through the course. So this desire here, called the will to receive, is going to decide that it doesn't want any light. It wants to be like the Creator. In fact, it wants to be like the Creator and still get the light. And it's going to figure out how to do that. And then it's going to develop a system where it will be able to do that. So what it's going to do is, it's going to go through levels. If we take this thing up here, what it's going to do is it's going to go through what you will call levels of concealment, where slowly but surely it's going to conceal itself from two things: from pleasure, spiritual pleasure, and it's going to conceal itself from the fact that there even is a giver. It's going to do this slowly, and it's going to do it in a machine-like form. And the first level of concealment is actually called Adam Kadmon. The next level of concealment, and there are some sub-levels in here that we'll be going through, but then it goes through another level of concealment called Atzilut, and then another one called Berea, then another one called Yetzirah. Yetzirah, my Hebrew teacher is going to shoot me here. And then a final one called Yesiah. And in truth, all of these here are, in Hebrew, the word is olamat. In English, worlds. The Hebrew word for a world, the Hebrew word for a world is olam. The Hebrew word for concealment is olamah. Olamah. So as you can see, we're talking about two things that are exceptionally close here. So it's going to go through these huge, massive, giant worlds. I can't draw them big enough. They're huge. They're great big. And we're going to get all the way down to where there is absolutely no sensation at all of the Creator or of spiritual pleasure in any way, shape, or form. None at all. And that's going to be a tiny little dot right there. And I made it small enough where you probably can't see it, so I'll enlarge it just big enough to where you can see it. Now it's still small, but I think you can make it out. But I want to emphasize how small this tiny little dot is. And what is this tiny little dot? Our universe. Our world. Here. This is where we are. So as you can see, we have several things to study here. And we're going to start, let's go back down here. We're going to start all the way up here. And we're going to talk about the development all through here. Then of this thing, whatever it is, this Kli, this thing actually called the Kli of Ein Sof. And then we're going to talk about this world called Adam Kadmon. And then we're going to talk about this world called Atzilut, this concealment. And then we're going to talk about this next world called Bria. And then we're going to talk about this next world, Yetzirah, and then this final world, Yesiya. So we're going to get all the way down to the bottom of Asiya. And you can actually spell it with an A. Asiya. That's the way it's spelled in most of the writing. So, what we want to do is we want to start all the way at the top, come all the way down to this little point called our universe, called our world, and find what we're going to discover is that we're going to go right back up the same path. And let's see what kind of questions we have here starting out. Okay, we'll start with Brandy. Brandy, is Adam and Eve, are Adam and Eve humans, or are they a source of light and energy, and due to the fall, it's a human body? Why was it male and female if it is one force? We will definitely study about Adam and Eve. And actually what it is, you won't understand this yet, it's a partsuf. It's a partsuf. It is a spiritual entity, and actually partsufim, that's plural for partsuf, or spiritual entity, begins showing up in this area called Adam Kadmon, and they will exist all the way through that. By the way, we have some other worlds in here that we haven't talked about yet, but these are the main 5 worlds. But Adam and Eve will actually appear somewhere in this thing right here, this thing called Absolute. And Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, the words of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, they all appear in the world called Absolute. They are a spiritual entity, and actually it was one single spiritual entity, not 2. That because of the breaking, yes, it ended up having 2 different parts to it. We'll go through that and why. So all of this is going to be answered, but it's going to take a little while, and we got a long way to go to get down there. And from Rev Swim from Orlando, does the desire to give rather than take necessitate the dissolution of the vessel? You'll understand a little bit more a little bit later on in the lesson here tonight, actually. We'll talk about that a little bit. You'll understand, because the first thing we're going to go through is the development of the desire. Malchishua from Austin. So Kabbalah is basically learning how to receive in order to bestow. Kabbalah is learning how to attain the qualities of the Creator. In fact, it's not learning, it's the process of it. The process of it. Georgie from Stamford, Connecticut. Hi, Georgie. How can it be said that one of the desires is not from the Creator? How can there be a thing which is not from the Creator? Stay tuned, you'll find out, Georgie. I'm getting ready to show you. Betty from Cincinnati, Ohio. We are vessels of desire, and the joy and fulfillment we feel in this corporeal world came from the light of the Creator. Why do some RE teachers of this class say that Kabbalah has nothing to do with the things of this world like wealth and health? Do you think that anyone plagued with the disease and hunger can reach a point in the heart to begin to find the ladder to the spiritual worlds? Do you think anyone plagued with disease and hunger can reach a point in the heart to begin to find the ladder to the spiritual worlds? Sure seems that way, doesn't it, Betty? Seems like, oh boy, I've got a problem here. And by the way, everyone's got a problem, Betty. What difference does it make if it's disease, if it's hunger, if it's money, if it's a marital problem, if it's this, if it's that, if it's something else? Everyone's got problems. Sure, it always depends upon the desire and when it lights up in a person. If they have it, they have it. And does the desire to give rather than take necessitate? We already answered that, and we'll get to it. Madian from Spain. What does it mean that those olamat are huge? Are they dimensions? Is our entire universe as we know it just Asiya? No, the entire universe is not Asiya. Not even close. It's a tiny, tiny dot underneath the world of Asiya. Spirituality is so much larger than one can even fathom. It is just huge. It's massive, far beyond one's wildest dreams. Glenn, the vessel looks like a crucible cup. Any relation to crucible? No. Let's go ahead and continue on and see if we can't get this. We have a lot of questions here. People wanting to mix Kabbalah with with corporeality, and I certainly understand that because people feel their corporeal desires here. It's going to be a while before you really begin to understand why, but we'll try to get to some of that tonight. So let's go ahead and continue and read.
Our entire existence is based upon one single fact. All that exists in this universe is the Creator's desire to delight us and our desire for that pleasure. Everything in the universe happens the way it does because of this law. We are completely and totally under its rule. All different kinds of existence, whether inanimate, vegetative, animate, or speaking, every single solitary thing wants to receive pleasure, to receive a spark of the light.
Let's stop there. Our entire existence is based upon one single fact. All that exists in this entire universe is the Creator's desire to delight us and our desire for that pleasure. By the way, I did want to answer one more question here. This one is from Rosa from New Mexico, one of our Spanish-speaking students. Why do I feel good when I give? But once I was in a situation where I felt so bad receiving. Why it happens to me when I receive? It's our nature. It's our nature. We want to feel, well, there's a thing called status. We want to feel like the giver, not like the receiver. We feel like that is better, it's higher, and it's independent. We don't want to be dependent on somebody. Now, let's get started with the text here, and we're going to go through the 4 phases of direct light now. It's a very important stage, and it's actually the creation of something exceptionally important. And it all starts out with this thing called the initial thought of the Creator. The initial thought of the Creator. What is that initial thought? That initial thought is to do good to His creatures. Now you might say, what creatures at this point? And we'll get into a slight problem here with time. But in time, in spirituality, there is no time. In other words, the instant that there was a thought, there are creatures for the Creator. And so we don't really have near the problem that one thinks with it. This initial phase here is actually called the root phase. And the word for root in Hebrew is shorish. And phase or discernment is behinot. Behina, actually. Behina shorish. What is this thing? This is the very, very first thing that has to happen before anything else happens here. What it is it is the initial thought of the Creator to do something, to make an action, for something to happen. Now, it is going to lead, and by the way, what else can we say about it? Absolutely nothing. We went over this in the lesson last week, but we can't talk about the Creator above to when we have some sort of root to it. Past that, there's no way to do it. There's no way to even discuss it. So there is this initial thought that leads to light, that builds a kli, and fills it. Builds a kli and fills it. Fills it with what? Pleasure. Pleasure. What is this called? What's this light called? Or pleasure. Because the initial thought was to please his creation. This light is pleasure. That's what light is. Now, this is called, this first building of this desire, this will to receive, is called Bihina Aleph. And in Hebrew, Aleph is equal to the number 1. Okay? The number 1. Now, what happens next? Here is kind of a neat thing. Toward the end of this phase, this will to receive is filled with pleasure. It builds a desire called a will to receive, and it fills it with pleasure, and it's filled with pleasure. But toward the end, it begins to feel something else. Something other than just pleasure. What? It begins to feel that there is a giver to that pleasure. That there's a giver to that pleasure. And because of this sensation that there's also a giver, it leads to a brand spanking new state. Because feeling that there's a creator, a giver, it begins to also want to do something else. It wants to be like the giver. And it's very, very, very similar like to when you were a child, if you are a boy and you're 3 years old and your dad's a fireman, and what are you doing? You're pulling on his big old fireman's boots and his big old red hat, and you're marching around trying to maybe put on his fireman's jacket, and of course it's dragging the ground behind you. Or if you're a lady, when you were a little girl, you might have put on mama's high heels, and walled around in those, maybe put lipstick all over your face or whatever it took. I remember seeing my sister put on my grandmother's hat all the way down over her head, wanting to be like her. We all had that desire when we were young. In this particular case, this is exactly what happens. It feels the giver. It wants to be a giver. That's the Creator's profession. It wants to be like the Creator. And it leads directly to a new state. This new state is called Bihina Bet. Bet is the Hebrew word for the numeral 2. Actually, it's the second letter, not the Hebrew word. And Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. But they actually have a value, a numerical value. Bihina Bet has the numerical value of 2. And what does this represent, this stage? It represents just the opposite. Remember, the vessel now wants to be like the giver, like the Creator. But here's the problem. It can't. Why? It doesn't have anything to give. Nothing. What's it going to give? So it does the next best thing. It does the only thing it has any clue about how to do. What's that? It is going to simply refuse to receive. It says, nope, no pleasure, thank you. Do you want? No. How about? No, thank you. I don't want anything, nothing. It's a strange sensation because it's one that we don't have here. We always want something. We always have a desire for something, even if it's a desire for rest and not consume food, not to do anything like that, but just rest. Just rest. And we're going to pause right there and take a couple of questions, and then we'll get back to this because we definitely want to finish it. Question from Klaus from Mexico. Could you please explain each world? Yes, all the way through the course. That's what this course will do. We certainly can't explain it all in one class, but that's exactly what we'll be doing. It'll take us about 10 weeks to go through it all, and each time we'll be going through one of the phases. By the way, what are we going through right now? We're going through this initial phase of the development of desire, and you'll understand a lot more in a bit. And let's see what else we have over here. How can we rise above the limitations of our physical state and experience the totality of nature so that we can be able to have a reference of good and evil all in our vessel's lifetime? Real simple. Simply attain the ability to do what the Creator does. Simply attain the second nature called the nature of holiness, the nature of Kedusha, the nature of the Creator, which is, of course, to bestow. And that is not the same thing as corporeal giving. So we'll leave that alone for a little bit. Hermilo from Florida, do the higher worlds contain the lower worlds? Everything is included. It has to. In fact, it's all included in this initial thought, all the way up here. All the way up here. And as you see how this expands down, you'll see actually what's happening is it's coming by cause and effect all the way down from up here all the way down to here. Robert, Cass from Brazil. Hi, Cass. What are the meanings of the name of the five worlds? What are the meanings? We'll go through that in time, I promise. By the way, we won't do it here. We have been asked to begin a new course. I don't know how we'll work it out yet, but it will be about, probably 45 minutes and probably somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe an hour before this class or something like that, where we will be providing you with some help with Hebrew words and that kind of thing. So it'll make it easier for you. Robert, that boy from Texas. Hi, Robert. How are you? It's good to, yes, Robert, that boy from Texas, is a gentleman that I was fortunate enough to meet, and I wish you well, Robert. I hope everything is going well for you out in San Fran. Is there enough corporeal time left in my life to obtain a Masach and enter the corporeal worlds? I'm almost 51 and am in a hurry. Baal Salam tells us, Robert, that after a person understands really what they're to do, which takes a little bit of time, for some people 6 months, for some people 3 years, that a person can enter spirituality in 3 to 5 years, in as little as 3 to 5 years. That may seem like a lot to a lot of people here. That's practically no time at all. It's very, very fast. And Robert, you've been developing toward entering spirituality for thousands of years, thousands of reincarnations, over and over and over and over and over again. So certainly, hang in there, keep after it, and at 51, that's not old. I hope not, because I'm 51, Robert. Jazz from Pennsylvania, what happens if you never get this desire? Do you get a chance to try again, and is that a negative or positive thing to come back? You mean if you don't feel it, right, Jazz? It's already there. It's already there. And, of course, it isn't that one comes back. One never has come back. There's this desire. There's this desire called the soul. It's the desire to do what the Creator does. And it is sound asleep. And it clothes in a corporeal body. And it changes clothing just like you change your shirt and your pants every single day, Jazz. It has no problem at all. It can do this just like that. No problem. And it isn't negative or positive. It's just what it does in order to be able to reach this equivalence of form with the qualities of the Creator. We'll talk more about reincarnation a little bit later in the class. Lewis from Virginia, or is it Louise? One of the two. Is there a relationship between seal, vegetative, animate, and spiritual to Asiya, Yetzirah, Beriah, and Atzilut? Yes, but not. You're trying to make a corporeal connection, and that you won't be able to do. John from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Are people without training in Kabbalah able to love compassionately, genuinely, caring for the well-being of another, and be aligned with the intention of God? Not a chance. Why? Because we aren't talking about training. Kabbalah is the process where people are able to love compassionately, genuinely caring for the well-being of another, and be aligned with the intention of God. That's called the process of Kabbalah. And Malchishua from Austin. Can you, pardon me, Malchishua, that's not easy to say. Can you all make it a little plainer? Right now the presentation and answers to questions are very abstract. Now that's because we're doing it before we're ever teaching. We just started. And so we want to make it plain, that's for sure, but the very first thing that we have to do is at least teach a little bit. And we start getting questions. Obviously, you haven't had the enough here yet for us to be able to really tell you your answers to your questions. When you talk about receiving, are you talking about receiving material things? No. Kara from California, is it possible to attain any of these levels without studying Kabbalah? No. Matt, can we become reflective to the light? Reflective? We'll talk about it. There is something that becomes reflective, yes. Patricio from Ecuador. Hi, Patricio. How do I survive if I refuse everything? You don't refuse everything. Don't worry. Pillar from Argentina. Are we the vessel? No, not this vessel. Mick from London. Do we ascend and fill these desires? Mick, do we ascend and fill these desires? What desires? We haven't gotten there yet. Stephen, when you talk about bestowal, are you talking about bestowal, about bestowing material things? Oh, wait, we just answered that. No. On Wednesday, we learned of rejection, correction, creating the need or desire. When we are experiencing many or different crises at once, it becomes confusing to define a single goal or desire. By the way, Tony was not talking about corporeality, and don't corporealize it. Everything here is free, so take what you want and enjoy. We're talking about spiritual matters when we're talking about rejection, or when you're talking about or Hosea. Sandra from Boston, how one can study Kabbalah when some of its concepts conflicts with one's faith. It has nothing to do with belief or faith, Sandra. It is purely with regard to what Kabbalists tell us that have entered spirituality, and give us instructions and say, this is how to do it. They aren't asking you to believe it. They say, Sandra, don't believe what we say. Go find out for yourself. Belief is something entirely different. I do want to get to the Spanish question as well from Leslie from New Jersey. Why the things are hidden from us, and how can we acquire the correction? You'll discover that in this class. Okay, let's continue now, so we can get through the 4 phases of direct light here. In review, Bihina Shorish is the initial thought of the Creator. The Creator wants to create his creature and please it. In fact, what he really wants is to give pleasure to his creature. That means having to create it. In Bihina Aleph, we have a vessel that was created by the light, by the pleasure. The light builds the vessel and fills it. Toward the end of that stage called Bihina Aleph, or 1, the vessel, this will to receive, begins to feel not only the pleasure, but also that there is a giver to this pleasure. It develops this desire to be like this giver, to do what this giver does, and so it changes into a new state. A new desire develops to where it doesn't want anything. In fact, it wants to be like the giver. It doesn't want to receive anything. It wants to give something and it can't. It has no ability to give, and so it does the next best thing. It stops giving. It stops receiving. Everything just shuts it off. Now, guess what? It's going to develop again. What's going to happen at the end of that stage? It's going to begin sensing something else. It's going to say, now wait a minute, this isn't working out for me. I am a will to receive. I'm supposed to receive pleasure. In fact, I've got to in order to even exist. So this is a problem for me. And then it's going to turn around and it's going to say, there's got to be a way that I'm able to do both things I want to do. Because what do I want to do? I want to be like the giver. But no matter what, I've got to receive something just to exist. Necessity. I've got to receive something, some pleasure. I'm a will to receive. I'm a desire for pleasure. So I've got to receive something. So what am I going to do? Where's the solution here? And so it's thinking about this, and it's really wanting to receive, but there's no way it can do it, because if it receives, then it's not fulfilling what it really wants, which is to be like the Creator. And if it doesn't receive, so it's like the Creator, it's not going to be able to exist. And then it strikes it. Eureka. I got it. If instead of receiving pleasure because I like it, instead of doing that, what if I receive pleasure because it's the giver's intention to give it to me? In other words, what if I only take into account I want to give the giver something? Now, if I want to give the giver something, and the giver only wants me to receive, wait a minute, this is starting to fit together a little bit. Let's try to draw an analogy here and see if we can understand this right. Let's say that you have a pair of, let's see, maybe that you've got a father that likes baseball, and you've got a pair of baseball tickets, and he also likes maybe a concert. You happen to have a pair of concert tickets too, and you're scratching your head because his birthday's coming up, and you want to please him. You want to please him. And you're glad you have these things because you don't have a lot of money. It isn't that you're rich or anything. In fact, you need money. But the problem is that you don't know which your dad would like the best. And you go to your dad and you say, Pop, I really want to get you what you want for your birthday. And so I'm going to, I've got something in mind, but I really would like a hint as to what you want for your birthday. And your father says, well, I'll tell you, you really want to know what would please me for my birthday? Is if you take this check for, say, $10,000 from me. Take this money from me. And you say, no, Dad, you're missing the point here. It's your birthday. It's your birthday. And so I want to give you a gift. Now, what can I give you? And he says, no, you're missing the point. You can give me pleasure by receiving the money. And however much it pleases you, that's the extent that it's going to please me if you are concerned about my pleasure. Now, this isn't, do not corporealize this, folks. I'm just trying to give you an example to where you can get an idea of what we're talking about here. So don't be thinking you can go out and do this in the corporeal world. It's not what it's about. But this is exactly what it figures out. It will receive pleasure only to the level, it will receive pleasure only to the level that it pleases the Creator. It can receive, the Creator wants to give it infinite pleasure, but it can receive, say, 30 grams of pleasure, or 30 pounds of pleasure, or 30 tons of pleasure, in order to please the Creator. If it receives 31 grams of pleasure, it would be doing it for itself. But in this particular case, 30 grams, that's as much as it can receive, and all in order to please the Creator. So what's it going to do? It's going to receive that in order to please the Creator, because that's exactly what the Creator wanted it to do. This state, this mixed phase of receiving and bestowing, is called Behina Gimel. Behina Gimel. And Gimel is the third letter in the Hebrew alphabet and carries the value of 3. Now, as you can imagine, this is going to lead to a new state. Now, remember a few minutes ago, we just read a question here that was a very good question, by the way. Somebody asked this. They said, how can something exist that wasn't created by the Creator? In other words, how in the world can there be existence from absence instead of existence from existence, like from the Creator? Well, toward the end of this phase, by the way, this is exactly what this vessel does. It receives pleasure in order to bestow to the Creator, but only in order to bestow. Now let's get even a little bit further into this. Let's go back to the father and the son or daughter example. In other words, it doesn't matter if, to you, from your perspective, it wouldn't matter if your father or mother or whoever wanted a new boat or a new house or a trip around the world or a new dress or new whatever, or to give you $10,000. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter a bit to you at all. The only thing that's on your mind in this phase, Behina Gimel, the only thing that's on your mind is the giver. What will please the other? That's it. It has nothing to do with your opinion. It only has to do with what will please the other. Whatever that takes. Trip around the world, fine. No problem. Here's a check. Here are the tickets. Me accept a check for $10,000? Fine. Whatever. That's fine. It's the same thing to me. It doesn't matter, because the only thing I care about is what's going to please the other. So, this is Behina Gimel. And at the end of this, something else occurs again. What happens here that changes everything? It made this act to where it received pleasure with an intention under the express law that it would do it only in order to please the Creator. And what did this do? Guess what? It found that there is an immense pleasure in doing something like Daddy. It found this amazing pleasure called status, because it did something, it made an act like the giver acts, by receiving only in order to give, by fulfilling the wishes of the other, regardless of what it took. It was bestowing. So, there's one final step to this development, and it's called phase dalet, which means phase 4. Whoops, left out a T. So, what is this? This Behinat dalet. In truth, it's a desire that's very, very special. It's a desire for two things. For two different kinds of pleasure. One of them is an old pleasure that you know very well by now, Behinat aleph. It wants that pleasure. You betcha. Gimme, gimme, gimme. Just like it always did. It feels the desire to receive pleasure because that's its nature. That's what it is. But this pleasure that it felt by doing an act similar to the Creator wasn't in this original package. That pleasure wasn't there. That pleasure wasn't there. And only by experiencing it first did it feel the pleasure from it and want it again. So it's kind of like if someone offers you a piece of food you'd never eaten before. I'll never forget when growing up in the South, used to go out with my parents and they had guacamole. And I used to look at this stuff, and this is the worst looking stuff on the planet. I mean, it's green, and it looks like green cottage cheese or something. I mean, it just looks awful. And I wouldn't try this thing forever. And finally, I took a bite of it and tried it, and by golly, it was good. It was good. Then I wanted it again. But they played the dickens ever get me to try it. Finally, after a couple of years of trying, I tried it. Now I had a vessel for it, a desire for it. Before I didn't. That's exactly what happened here. It had never received, that the original pleasure here wasn't in this original package of pleasure that the Creator gave it. This one is a new pleasure that stems from it actually making an act of bestowal. In other words, this pleasure is from having the status of the Creator, being able to do what the Creator does. Having the desire to do what the Creator does. You know this, again, we have two pleasures here. You know our two desires. You know this part real well under another name. Later, through a concatenation of all through these areas, that one desire is going to break in here and fall and split into 600,000 pieces and just keep right on splitting. Over and over and over. The other name for this, the other name for that desire, that second desire, that something from nothing desire, that independent desire, is called the soul, neshama. In addition to that, this thing, this soul, is actually going to appear over here as a partsuf, a spiritual entity, that it's known as Adam HaRishon. Yes, it is the Adam that you refer to. It's going to have two parts to it. It's going to have a will to receive part, and it's going to have a will to bestow part. The will to bestow is going to be the what's called zakar, the masculine part. And it's going to be called Adam. It's going to have a feminine part that is all will to receive, ratzon lekabel, all vessels of reception. And it's going to have a name too. It's called Eve. And yes, it's going to do something that is going to cause it to break into all sorts of pieces. And would you believe that's, of course, called the fall? And then what's it going to do? It is going to repair itself slowly over time. The entire fall, the entire breaking was an absolute necessity and had to happen. It was a must. But because of that breaking, which actually mixed two things, the qualities of the Creator with the qualities of the creature, that's the only way that the creature can possibly ever be able to do anything like the Creator's if he knows anything about the Creator. And what's going to happen here? It's going to be a process to where it goes into complete, total, absolute, 100% concealment, called this world. It's going to perceive nothing except enough to keep it barely alive, a little spark of light, and that's all. And that's called our reality here in corporeality. It has, the desires here have nothing to do with spirituality, as some lady was asking earlier. What in the world? I mean, we get all this down here. No, we don't get spiritual pleasure here. The pleasures that we receive here have nothing to do with spiritual pleasure. They're just a teeny weeny tiny one little spark. Think of a sparkler. One little tiny spark. And that's it. That's all the pleasure that's ever existed here in corporeality and ever will. Now let's see if we can't get to, and by the way, that's where we're headed. This process we just went through is called the 4 phases of direct light. It has additional names that we can use that represent it differently. If we're talking about the vessels, this one is not really a vessel here, but we'll call it one. Keter, Chokmah, Bina, Zer Anpin, and Malchut. And if you think of these, you can think of them as qualities. For instance, Keter is the quality of the initial thought of creation. Chokmah you can think of as the quality of the desire to receive to receive the spiritual pleasure. Bina you can think of the desire not to receive spiritual, not to receive anything. Zerampin you can think of as this combined phase of wanting to receive but only in order to bestow. And Malchut you can think of as these two combined desires in one kli here, the desire for the original pleasure and the desire to do what the Creator does, the desire to bestow. They also are represented by lights. And we'll start down here. We have Nefesh. What is a light? It's the pleasure. Ruach. Neshama. Haya. And Yechida. And these represent the filling of those vessels, the light inside them. And let's try to get to some more questions here for you. Okay, let's go back up here a ways. A lot of questions. There's the one about faith, so we're getting close here. Ernest from New York. Doesn't following the precepts of Torah accomplish these goals? No. You're talking about physical acts? No. What accomplishes the goal? What are you trying to do, Ernest? What I'm trying to do here, what we're trying to accomplish here, is to feel this desire here, this second one, to do what the Creator does. That's what we're actually trying to get to. We want to do what the Creator does. That isn't done by some corporeal act. That requires a change in my very nature. To change out software, if you saw the class last time, what do we have to do? We have to switch out this software. And Ernest, it's already running. It is constantly running 100% of the time. People always want to know what are the precepts of Torah for the physical ones, if not for this. There is reminders as to this goal when you're in concealment. The reminders to the goal, Ernest, they are not the way to achieve the goal. Does that mean one shouldn't do them? No, if you grew up in that culture, you should do them. Most certainly, if that's what you grew up with, and it serves as a reminder to you as to the goal. If not, then the Torah and following those precepts is called a potion of death, and you just sit there and do them and think you're getting more spiritual. Madian from North Spain. Would the phases have happened all in one instant? Is then the creation a process, vessel to be fulfilled, and the creature the agent to realize it? No, the creature is the will to receive. It's number one. And would the phases have happened all in one instance? Madian from Spain. If you're talking about with regard to the Creator, oh yes, this is already done. Everything, from the Creator's perspective, all this correction all the way back up to here to where the creature is able to receive in order to bestow. It does exactly the same thing that the Creator does. Bestows by receiving, no problem, fully corrected. You see, what we have here is we have three different phases. Here's phase one, that initial thought of the Creator. Then we have phase two, all of this process here. And then we have phase three. From our perspective, we're down here. From the Creator's perspective, we're up here. There is no time in spirituality. Yet to us, our perception is here, obviously. And more, Glenn from Maine, is the development and the use of the sixth sense free from the illusion of the programming of the five? Definitely. That's why people that think, what they see here in their five senses, it will, all this is suddenly going to appear in their five senses. Think of it this way. You have five senses here, your sense of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and of course your tactile sense. And in truth, in spirituality, you have 613 senses. 613 organs in which to be able to sense pleasure, Glenn. It's a lot better deal. It's a lot better deal. Stephen, receiving and bestowal refer to spiritual things, not when you're talking about corporeality. When we're talking about spirituality, yes, that's all there is. What the Creator does and what the creature does. Maria from Venezuela, do you consider possible that other people have attained the upper worlds making the same process of the Kabbalah? Yeah, we kind of answered this again. It's off topic, and we've answered it before. Kabbalah is not a study. Kabbalah is the process of attaining the ability to bestow, attaining the properties of the Creator. And everyone wants to know, is there a way other than studying Kabbalah? I know. And by the way, I went through this myself, folks. I studied Taoism for many, many years. I thought that this was an answer to it, to be able to actually to enter spirituality. And a lot of people have done this, gone through many, many different things. And they wonder, oh my gosh, is this the thing? And they're always worried, and they always think, my gosh, surely there's another way to get there other than this. Surely. There's got to be some other way than me changing. Or maybe there's another way that will change me. I understand. The answer is no. But don't believe me. Find out for yourself. When you go through that change, you won't ask that question anymore. You'll say, oh, there's only one way to do this. That's it. No other way. Randy. Since sex is an animal desire, where did it originate? Is it wrong? What is the purpose of procreation? You will find that out most definitely here. Most definitely. What's the root of this desire called sex? And it's called zivug. In Kabbalah, it means coupling, and it is when the will to receive couples, mates, with the light. With the light. So yes, it definitely has. That's why this is our strongest drive. I mean, someone that's hungry suddenly loses their appetite. Someone that wants to sleep suddenly can't sleep. They have this desire. Why? Because we're talking about the mating of the Creator. We're talking about the joining of the Creator and the creature. Not in the way you can think of it here corporeally. It just appears here like that. So don't misunderstand and think that corporeal sex has anything to do with spirituality. It doesn't. It has a spiritual root, but you cannot use it in order to enter spirituality. Bill from Louisiana. What causes one stage to end and another begin? Good question. At the end of each stage, like this, there is a connector. In this, between Behina Aleph and Behina Bet, that connector is actually the sensation of the Creator that is discovered in Behina Aleph. It not only feels the pleasure, but now it feels the pleasure along with the sensation of the Creator, that there is a giver to that pleasure. And this causes the transition to the new desire. Something warm, please. Please. Thank you. Between Behina Bet and Behina Gimel, it is the sensation that, I'm a will to receive. Dave, I'm a will to receive. What am I going to do if I don't receive something? I have to receive something, yet I have this tremendous desire to not receive anything. Actually, I have a desire to be like the Creator, this desire for a status of the Creator. So what am I going to do here? And in the phase Behina Gimel to phase Behina Dalet, there is this incredible sensation of the creature that it received pleasure from doing this, a brand new pleasure it had never felt before. And therefore a new desire is created. Something from nothing. A desire that has nothing to do with the original desires that came in it. But this pleasure came from actually performing an act like the Creator. It is a pleasure of bestowal. Thank you. Pardon me. It's a pleasure of equivalence of form. Liz. Hi, Liz. Not sure where Liz is from. Not sure the question got answered. Does the Creator define our focus on what to desire or receive? Of course. Of course. Liz, you're going to go through this with Tony especially. It'll be the class called Freedom of Will. And that's really something when you discover, where in the world does everything I want come from? Is it really me? Am I really an independent creature here that I think that I'm the one that's determining what I get? We also touched on this a bit in the first lesson, and if you didn't watch it, you might review it. Claude from Montreal. The refusal of the light in phase Bet, was it part of the divine plan for us? Have Kabbalah said something about that? Yes, Claude. Everything from after the initial thought here, let's draw a, well, I need something a little bit more stark here that'll, oh, that's an ugly color. We'll use that one. Let's draw this all the way across. You'll be able to see it fairly well then because it's kind of a bright green. And here is phase 1, here's phase 3, and everything below the line is phase 2. There is, like I said before, when the lady asked me about are there many ways to do this, there's only one. All of this, every bit of this, everything under this green line here, everything under the green line here has to be within this initial thought, all of it. But now, from the Creator's perspective, Claude, from the Creator's perspective, everything happens, initial thought, done. It's only from our perspective that we have all this stretching out of phases, actually, between one phase and another, and we call that development period, from our perspective, we call it time. Teresa from Philadelphia. Is it possible to be born? Here we go. Is it possible to be born in the spiritual realm of Kabbalah? No. Everyone's born the same way. We were born as wild asses, wild colts. Everyone is born with simply, and by the way, we is not the point in the heart. We, that you think of now as the corporeal human being, is simply a will to receive personality that exists on top of that point in the heart. That's either a sleeping or it's felt. How do I know if I'm feeling my point in the heart? How do I know it? How do I know this isn't just some silly desire in me to try to find some kind of pleasure other than saying one for money? How do I really know? What's the sign of my point in the heart? If I'm reaching a place to where I'm asking myself, you know, there's something missing here. There's a pleasure that I can't put my hand on it. The problem is, sleep doesn't fix it. A nice house doesn't fix it. My wife or my husband doesn't fix it. My kids don't fix it. It isn't that I don't love them, because I do, but this is an additional desire. It doesn't take away from it. It's something additional. I can have a lot of money and it doesn't fix it. I can have a lot of honor, it doesn't fix it. I can have all the control in the world over a lot of stuff, and it doesn't fix it. It isn't a desire for those things. In fact, I can know a lot in some certain subject, and it doesn't fix this. My gosh, what in the world could it be? What is going to fulfill this lack? The second sign is actually a question that appears within me. And this question is a fair one, but it's cruel at the same time. It's, what in the world am I supposed to be doing while I'm on the planet? What am I saying if I've asked that question? I'm saying, what I'm doing is obviously not it. No one wants to think that. But it sneaks up on you. These are the ways to tell if you have that desire. What is the difference between Behina Aleph and Behina Dalet? Is it that in Bhina Dalit you are consciously receiving the light? Louise from Virginia. What is the difference? The difference is that you have two separate desires within Bhina Dalit. One is for the pleasure of Bhina Aleph, and one is for the pleasure of the status of the Creator. And the second thing is, you are correct. You actually have a creature here. Why? Because everything from here to here, go back to this horrid thing, from here to here, this is all happening cause and consequence. Now all of a sudden we've got a different situation here. Now all of a sudden we have an independent creature. We have something that's independent, that's aware of itself. It's also aware, think about it, folks. It has two desires, and it's going to feel both of them. It's going to receive everything it possibly can, and it's also going to do it in order to bestow the Creator so it can get that pleasure too, because it wants it all. It's the most egoistic thing you can think of. It wants to use the Creator for its own pleasure. And the problem is that it's also doing an act of the Creator. It's doing this holy act, and so because of that, it has a sensation of the qualities of the Creator, and it has a sensation of its own qualities, and they are diametrically opposite. Totally, completely opposite. Oh no, that's a problem. Why? Because its whole desire is to be like the Creator, to do what the Creator does. And it finds out its opposite. So every single time that it receives something, it feels something. What does it feel? We're going to find that out next week. But to answer your question even further, Lewis, yes, it does consciously. Now it is aware of itself. Here it is self-aware completely in Bhina Dalit. Patricio, when I see around me and think about why things are the way they are, I have a sensation that makes me feel very small, and this scares me. Is this normal? Again, this is definitely not applies to our class in the material. The answer is yes, it's very normal. Monty in Washington, D.C., if Kabbalah is the only way to enter, then Christ, Buddha, Krishna, a host of spiritual pioneers are disillusioned. Is this what Kabbalah believe? Kabbalists don't believe a thing. Kabbalists only, they don't go by faith. This isn't a matter of faith. This is a matter of attainment, Monty. And most certainly, they don't speak of Christ, Buddha, Krishna, or any of this stuff at all. They only speak of spirituality. The only thing I could tell you is that you'd have to get there and find out for yourself. Hermilo from Florida. Does every thought come from the upper worlds like the light comes down? Does every thought come from the upper worlds? Of course. What is a thought? A thought is a calculation on how to receive, on how to fulfill a desire. So any time that I have a thought, it's going to be a consequence of the desire I received, wherever I got that desire from. Where did that desire come from? My desires are either already in me, and you'll hear this from Tony in his Will to Receive lesson. One you will not want to miss, trust me. Either my desires come from inside in my genetics, or they're being advertised to me from my environment. It's the only two options. Mark from Ontario. Saying a blessing after each event in our life, is this the giving back? No. Again, that's corporeal, has nothing to do with spirituality. Pedro. Is Malchut also a spiritual world, or is it our level of existence? Malchut is the creature, Pedro. Chris from Arlington. Do we need to memorize all those new words? You might hear some of the students laughing in the background that are here. No, you don't need to memorize them. You'll read them enough and hear them enough that they become familiar to you, Chris, and it isn't near what you think. It isn't hard. Cass, before Eve, there's not Lilith. What about her? Yeah, we'll talk about it. That's a long way off. Jazz. Will world peace through Kabbalah bring us back to Adam? Will world peace through Kabbalah bring us back to Adam? First of all, we're all parts of Adam. So it isn't so much as bringing us back to Adam. Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall and broke. The whole point is to reconnect it. World peace would be a result of the reconnection, not the cause of bringing us back to Adam. Bringing us back to Adam, in other words, putting Humpty Dumpty back together again, all the pieces again, will create the world peace. Jill from Tampa, Florida. Why is Eve the receiver when it appears women are so much more willing to give? How is it that male is a bestower and they seem greedy to me? Me too, Jill, the jerks. In truth, Jill, this is a hard one to discover. First of all, remember that thing that I talked about earlier about the breaking? What happened was that these parts that broke, the male parts, they fell as low as they possibly could, and they took on the qualities of the will to receive. And there's nothing, Jill, more mean, more nasty, as you can see by all the wars and everything else, than a little piece of will to bestow that's all broken, that doesn't function as a will to bestow anymore, that doesn't do its job. Now let's address something else. When it appears that women are so much more willing to give, no, they aren't. Not at all. Not even once. Not even to their children. Not even to their grandchildren. Every single action that they make is for themselves, and they're in concealment of it. They don't understand. They do every single time what feels right to them and what will bring them pleasure. If you think you do something for your child that really is not for you, ask yourself if this is what's right for your child. The moment that you do that, you start to begin to feel the pleasure that you receive because of the child's pleasure. Would you not care if the child was suffering? It would make you hurt, right? All right, well, so you're avoiding suffering. You're attaining pleasure from the child being happy. Unfortunately, this is a very hard state to come through. I mean, I get all these questions about Mother Teresa and Jack the Ripper and trying to compare the two and all of this, because will to receive is will to receive in spirituality. This is very true. But it's not in corporeality, and we also live in this world, and we have to continue living here. Phil in Michigan, is the desire to receive for the sake of bestowing, simply put, accepting that all delight comes from the Creator, independent of us, as our ego would lead us to believe? In other words, we get taste of it from the Creator, not from us? Is the desire to receive for the sake of bestowing, simply put, accepting that all the delights come from the Creator? No, it isn't. It is not, Phil. The desire to receive for the sake of bestowing is putting an anti-egoistical intention called a masach over each and every desire that one has, but we're talking about spiritual desires. These 613 senses, those 613 desires. Down here you have 5 senses. They don't need a masach, and you can't put one on them. Forget it. They aren't. Corporeality is not going to be the way that you can get there. But you put 613 masachs on 613 senses, and all of a sudden you are able to bestow in a lot of different ways. But, Phil, it has nothing to do with accepting something or believing something, that type of thing. Faith and spirituality is actually the perception of the Creator, not belief as it is here in religions. Estefania from Brattonville, Florida. What are corporeal pleasures for if they don't have any connection with spiritual ones? Real simple. I know this is hard for people. Why do they say, oh, what's the connection? Surely. This one little bitty tiny spark that divided into all of the pleasures of this world here. Basically what we have here is a starting place in total complete concealment of the Creator and of spiritual pleasure. But we have to have a sensation, at least, that we exist. That's why this world called corporeality, all this corporeal universe, gets at one tiny spark. Now think about it, folks. One tiny spark. That's it. And it created all of this. This tiny spark of pleasure you call your perception. What you view as real. That's it. That's all. It gives you a starting place in total concealment so you have a sensation of yourself and can begin the process. That's the only reason for it, Estefania. Mick, so our world is on the bottom of Behinat Dalit. No. Our world is on the bottom, is underneath this, what's called the siyum, the conclusion of spirituality. Underneath the conclusion of spirituality. Liana from Florida. I noticed that these are the same names as some of the Sphirot. What's the connection? Very good question. Because they will have the same qualities. For instance, we have this quality of not wanting to receive, and when we get in the Partsuf and the 10 Sphirot, there's the third Sphira called Bina. What is Bina's quality? Not to receive. Not to receive. So yes, Liana, by the way, very astute. Emmett from New York. Did the Baal Salam follow the precepts of Torah? Source for the potion of ETH label? Source for potion of death label, please. It's in several different articles. One of them is, the source of it is his article, Breaking the Iron Wall, would be the main place you could find it. Did Baal Salam follow the precepts of the Torah? Of course he did. It is his culture, and he strongly suggested that anyone that is in the religion or culture remain in the religion or culture. That studies, and that includes, I assume you're talking about Judaism now since you're talking about the precepts. D from Virgin Islands. Do you have to trust there's a creator to work with Kabbalah? No way. Why? What creator, D? You see one underneath the desk maybe? Or, where? Where's the creator in this picture? That's a problem, isn't it? No creator around here. The creator's in concealment, D. There's no way to see the creator. A couple of more questions here. Want to get to some of our Spanish friends. Getting questions from two different Spanish. Question from Luis Alfonso from Panama. What is an intention in Kabbalah? Excellent question. What's an intention? It is the aim. It is to where the end result of the pleasure would be. It's the aim. In mathematics, it's called a vector. So, what do I want? What I want is, there is a desire here, and I want to direct where the pleasure is going to go to from this desire. To whose benefit am I going to use this desire? My own, one out from around me, to whose benefit? Multe from Argentina. If my vessel rejects what the Creator gives, what does the creature do if it doesn't know how to receive anymore, only gives? It can't do that. It has no choice but to receive. And you do it with every breath you take. The proof is in how you live right now. Try stopping breathing and watch what happens. It will protect itself. Leslie from New Jersey. Why are things hidden from us? How can we obtain correction? Things are hidden for a very good reason. Leslie, why are we down here? That's what you're really saying. Hidden. These worlds are all levels of concealment. Why in the world is everything hidden from us? What's up with this hidden deal? Why isn't it just out in the open? Well, here's the problem. The problem is that as it exists here in what's called Ein Sof, or Ein Sof, again, my Hebrew teacher's not going to be happy with me tonight. Ein Sof, it wants everything completely, totally egoistically. I want to bestow. You bet I do. Why? Because it gives me fantastic pleasure. And I want to receive the pleasure too. Why? Because it gives me fantastic pleasure. I want the whole 9 yards. As it exists now, it can't do a blasted thing. It can only make an egoistic act, and that's not going to help it out any. It wants to do something, an act of bestowal, but it can't. So what? Because the problem is just the sensation of the giver is pleasure to it. What it's got to do is it needs to separate itself all the way down to where it doesn't sense anything, where it doesn't want spiritual pleasure, doesn't want any part of it. Only then can it make its own independent decision to switch its nature, that internal programming that we talked about, from receiving to bestowing. Question from Gustavo from Argentina. As creature, what is the indicator that we are going to the right direction as a creature? What is the right direction? The desire. What do you want? That's exactly what is going in the right direction. By the way, who can study this wisdom? Who can study this fantastic wisdom? This method in order to achieve equivalence of form with the properties of the Creator. Only one with a desire for it. The desire points the direction. Laura from Spain, it's clear that the vessel is filling. But I don't understand, how do we realize that the giver exists if there's no realization of pleasure? You don't. What you have to do is come to the desire to attain the ability to bestow without coercion to do it. We'll talk more about that. That's a hard one. Potion of Death, I found the Jewish precepts over the last 5 years to be a wonderful discovery. Sure, it feels good. It's a pleasure. If I take this primary study, then wouldn't the Jewish precepts assist? If they remind you, yeah. If they don't, then they don't. Or can they no longer matter at all? Raised Baptist and converted to Catholic, but no longer interested in that? if you wanted to do them to get pleasure out of them, that's fine, but that's not the reason to do them. They serve as a reminder of what the true goal is, which is to change my nature to one of that of the Creator. If I lose track of that and I do them just because it feels good to do them, if I get pleasure from it, that's no deal. That's just filling your will to receive again, like Mother Teresa building orphanages. Is Estefania again, please? Is the sixth sense that Kabbalah talks about the same one that some other philosophies or in the urban premonitions, feeling in the gut? No. Sultan, England. No, it's not at all. We're talking about spiritual senses here, not some psychological sense. Sultan, and by the way, those do exist, but they aren't spiritual. Sultan from England. Are there two kinds of bestowal, or does the Creator bestow through us? Are we part of the Creator's bestowal? Good question. Are we part of what the Creator's doing? And in fact, if Tony was right in the article that he read, that there's none else besides him, meaning that there's no other force that operates in all of creation, then every act that I make, that you make, that Jack the Ripper makes, that Mother Teresa makes, all of them, they're all from the Creator, aren't they? But if that's the case, then where am I in this picture, Sultan? Let's think about that one. Patricio from Ecuador. When I give for the good of other people, I still receive happiness that I feel that this is so much greater than what I have gave to the other person. How can I give without receiving anything? You can't. You can't. There's no way to do it, but you need to find that out for yourself. In fact, there is a way to do it, but it requires the Creator to intervene. Lewis, do the lower stages encapsulate the upper stages? Do the lower stages encapsulate the upper stages? Yes. It's called clothe. Stephen, please help. What exactly are we receiving and bestowing? Here, Stephen, nothing. Nothing. That's the whole point. There's nothing here. Kara from California. How will, by the way, let's go back to that just a moment. And then we're going to shut it down here because we're way over time, but I did want to answer some of these. What are we receiving and bestowing? Stephen. That's just it. What we call life in corporeality is not what's called life in spirituality. Life in spirituality is the sensation of the Creator. The sensation of the Creator. It's the sensation along with it. What is the sensation of spirituality? The sensation of the Creator. The sensation that there is a giver, that there is a Creator. Now, we aren't talking about a belief or some corporeal phenomena that caused me to feel this way or because someone told me about it. We're talking about a sensation, a sense, like I see people here, all around here, 15 people in here. And every single one of them senses me. This is how, it's that strong of a sense, just like that. Out through the eyes? No, but it's a sensation that's just as definite as what you see. And along with it, I see other spiritual objects, the objects that the Kabbalists talk about. And along with that, I sense my own immortality. All of this is called spirituality. And it's all called life. I used a example earlier in a short lesson earlier about a rock that becomes a human being. And another rock looks over to it and says, "Don't you miss doing the things rocks do?" And of course, it's scratching its head saying, "They sit there." That's the whole thing. From the point of view of someone in spirituality, life is bestowing and all the things that are there. This is perfectly still. to the one in spirituality, nothing's happening here. Nothing. Nothing. I think we'll call it a night right there. I realize you all have tons of questions, and your questions are very good for the most part. I want to caution you again, please. Please do ask questions during class that are based upon our materials. It's going to get deeper quick. The second thing that I want you to do is to please take a few minutes right now. Everyone simply go to the website, post your questions there. They're going to be answered. We have people there. We have Tony. We have Igal. We have William. We have Dave. We have administrators that will come and answer your questions for you. So please come and just post your question in the forum real quick, and you'll be able to get an answer to it from one of our instructors. I'll be on it tomorrow morning and answer a few questions myself. So again, first of all, make sure that you're there Wednesday night. It'll be a very special lesson from Tony. That'll begin at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and then we'll be back again next Sunday. And until then, I wish you all a wonderful week, wonderful new week, and see you next Sunday night. Bye-bye.